Island star Anton. On Tuesday, we're going to play a Kahoot and do some more club-a-size before a hip-hop dance class and chatting to light up a life during acts of kindness. And then we're joined by the incredible Lady Levy. On Wednesday, we're going to play bingo and then do some more aerobics with Joe. And then we're going to do a skin and hair care session before getting involved with our acts of kindness. And on Thursday, we're going to do some more arts and crafts before debunking some workout myths and then doing our acts of kindness before hearing from the incredible Paralympian Tanni Grey-Thompson. But before all of that, it's our special guest for tonight. Our guest tonight is a life peer, political campaigner, award winner, and leading authority on later life issues such as pensions, social care, and retirement policy, and is best known to us as the former Minister of Pensions. Baroness Ros Altmann Cbe was born and raised in Tottenham to the children of Austrian refugees and was part of the vibrant Jewish life that was the East End, and like me, is a huge Spurs fan. After graduating from UCL with a first-class degree in economics, she went on to get a scholarship to study in Harvard and then completed her PhD from LSE in UK pension policy, occupational pensions and retirement. Leaving her academic career for the investment world, Ros worked for 15 years at Chase Manhattan's International Invest operation as the director at Rothschild Asset Management and NatWest Investment Management. Using her expertise, she established herself as a consultant specialising in pensions, savings and retirement, and pressured the government and the UK Treasury to reform a broken state pension scheme that had failed many people. Elevated to life peer for her expertise and as part of her appointment in 2015 as the Minister for Pensions, her work has left a lasting legacy by creating a simpler and more sympathetic workplace pension scheme. Continuing to speak out and write articles on pension reform, she was rewarded as the Pensions Personality of the Year twice. She was also awarded the Industry Guru of the Year, Women in Public Life Award, and the Times' Business Big Shot. And in June 2019, she was appointed the Vice President of the Jewish Leadership Council, that Tuesday's guest, Jonathan Goldstein, is the chair of. Straight from voting in the House of Lords, we are so grateful that she has taken the time out of her busy schedule to join us this evening. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming tonight's very special guest, Baroness Ros Altmann. Good evening, Baroness. How are you?
I hope I can be unmuted now.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, great. So lovely to see everybody. Thank you for that much too kind introduction, Jamie. And it's lovely to be here with all of you, whoever you are out there, who support JLGB, which is a fantastic organisation.
Thank you for joining us. How has lockdown been treating you and how are you staying positive?
That's a very good question. Lockdown is something that I absolutely hate. Some people have loved it, which I found very interesting. You know, some people are just saying, oh, I'm quite happy not to see anybody. But I really have missed it terribly. But I keep trying to be positive by saying, number one, every morning when I wake up, I think I am so much luckier than so many other people. And number two, I am sure this won't last forever. So we will get back to some kind of normal life. And if it takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of time.
Yeah, I think just rolling with it right now is what we can do. So we are extremely pleased to have you here tonight on our JLGB virtual programme. We've been boosting positivity and keeping children and their families active, healthy and entertained for 16 weeks now since lockdown began, with the help of a special guest like yourself helping us each evening. Why do you think it was important for you to join us this evening? I believe that you were persuaded by our President, Lord Levy, who I hear you might be related to.
Michael's wife, Lord Levy's wife, is my cousin. So you might well know that Lord Levy is not somebody you can really say no to. So
I think we've heard that from a few of our guests. Yeah,
but as well as that, I think JLGB is a fantastic organisation. My husband, Paul, was in JLGB for many years. Our daughter, Emma, was also in JLGB. I know what great work you do. And it's fantastic that despite lockdown, you're able to get together and have some sense of camaraderie and togetherness, which is the big thing about lockdown, where you suddenly can't see anybody. So, you know, from the perspective of somebody who hated lockdown, the idea that you have been able to create something, albeit virtually, where people can get together and feel part of a group, I think that's really, really so important, and all credit to you.
I must say that I'm so proud, and all the other virtual hosts, we're so proud to be a part of an organisation that has done what we've been doing for 16 weeks now. So we are all about acts of kindness here at JLGB. You may have caught the last couple of minutes in our acts of kindness session just before. We always ask our guests what they've been doing to help others. Now, you work tirelessly on helping people and their futures, but is there a particular act of kindness that you've been doing during the pandemic?
Well, I do try and always be kind, but I think more than ever, it's so important for me to be feeling that I'm part of my community. So, you know, doing whatever I can to help other people in our Finchley Synagogue community. And also, of course, I'm doing a lot more charity work. You know, I often get asked to do charity speeches, and I usually say no, because there's usually going to be something else going on. Having had the time to be able to say yes has been something that I'm really pleased about, because for years there are groups that I've wanted to be able to speak to and haven't had the chance to, which I can now do. You know, I think the whole of my idea of the Jewish ethos is kindness, mitzvot and good deeds and looking after other people, not just yourself. So that isn't just about lockdown, actually. I think that's something that goes with being Jewish, for me anyway. And I think JLGB also has often been doing all sorts of great volunteering work, and the people running JLGB are often volunteers. So, you know, I think we are so fortunate to have a kind, caring community with so many people who want to give. You know, Jewish people tend to want to give. I'm not saying others don't, because of course, I think what we've seen during lockdown is a lot more people across the country, whichever walk of life they've been in, getting motivated to try and look after others, to help others, doing favors for people, looking after those who are elderly in their neighborhood and going shopping for them, or if someone's not well, looking out for them, more than we might otherwise have done. You know, Brits tend to have a reputation of being a bit standoffish, and, you know, you can go and, in the olden days, sit on a bus and you could be sitting next to somebody and not say a word the whole journey. Whereas actually now, I think people have been picking up the phone and trying, or messaging others just to see, are you okay? And I think that's great.
Definitely. The power of kindness, I think, is something that has just shone through. I think half the things wouldn't run. JLGB Virtual, for one, like, we have so many volunteers behind the scenes. You've met a couple of them. There are so many of us that give up our time, and without these volunteers, things like virtual wouldn't run. And yeah, kindness is something that's been pushed forward to the forefront of society now because of this pandemic.
Yes.
So let's go back to the very beginning, if I may. Your grandparents were refugees who fled Vienna before the Holocaust. How do you think this has impacted you as you've grown up? How much has it defined your identity? And are you happy to share your family story with us this evening?
Well, both my parents were born in pre-Nazi Europe, my father in Vienna, my mother in Berlin, and they had to flee. And I think that has definitely coloured my life, because I was brought up with stories about what happened to, unfortunately, the vast majority of both lots of families who didn't survive, and the terrible things that human beings could do to one another. And that has stayed with me, those stories and that pain. And I think it's also meant that I feel a lot closer to my family. For example, with Lord Levy and his wife Gilda, you know, we are probably third cousins, but I've always felt that we're really close family because my father didn't really have much other family, you know, and that is part of who we are. And we all have heard stories and mixed with people who've had that necessity to flee. So I have always been proud and so comfortable with the idea that we're in Britain. Britain never was part of the Nazi regime, as it were. We stood firm. We managed to protect our country against that evil. And I have always felt that Britain is one of those countries which has been welcoming, which has made it possible to be who you are without worrying where you came from. And that's not always the case. And of course, there are elements in the development of our country over the last recent period which might have made me question that in ways that I never did before. But even so, I think, you know, we are so fortunate to have been able to live in a country where, you know, my parents and their families who came here with nothing, they left everything behind, could still make a life, have an education, have healthcare, have opportunities to then use their skills and talents without the prejudice that might hold people back in other countries. And I'm really proud of what Britain has stood for.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that story with us. So you are now a pensions expert. So was that always on the cards for you? When did you first know that you cared so much about social impact, campaigning for financial injustice, and just helping ordinary members of the public? It's clearly in your DNA. So how much of that wanting to help comes from your Jewish and British values?
Oh, we were always brought up to be honest, say the right thing, stand up for people if they were being bullied, to try and help them rather than run away or join the bullies. We were, you know, that's how we were raised, that we've got to look after people who either can't look after themselves or people who were facing a hard time unfairly. You know, this issue of fairness. And I think you see that across Jewish communities, across the entire world. Very often the advocates for social justice and justice are more highly represented than they would be among the entire population. It seems to be something that is instilled with the Jewish ethos. But as regards me, I certainly cannot ever tell you that my burning passion when I was growing up was to be an expert in pensions. It had never crossed my mind. I just ended up there. I was working in economics, and then I decided I'd want to do a PhD after I'd had my year at Harvard. And it just so happened that there was a database that had come available on pensions. And my advisor said to me, well, that's a real gift to anyone who wants to do a PhD. It should be really easy to do something original because nobody had ever looked at pensions then in that same way. And as soon as he told me something would be easy, I thought, well, that sounds good. So I did a PhD on pensions and I found it fascinating. So, you know, after that, I was hooked on issues surrounding pensions and making later life better for people in all sorts of different ways. So I ended up there by accident, and my whole career has sort of revolved around the different areas of pensions. but it wasn't pre-planned. And I must admit, I think it would be very odd if any person told you they were growing up passionate about pensions. It's something that you end up with. And however, when I was originally, in my 20s, 30s, working on pensions, and I'd go to a dinner party and somebody would ask what you do, and I'd say I work on pensions. It was the biggest conversation stopper, like you could get rid of a whole crowd of people by saying you work on pensions. Nowadays, actually, it's very interesting. When you say you work on pensions, everybody's got a question to ask you. What about my pension? Or what do you think about pensions? Or this was terrible about pensions, or this was brilliant. So, society has moved on and attitudes to pensions have definitely changed.
Definitely. I think you may have got into it by accident, but I think there are many, many people out there that would thank you for all the work you've done for them and for their pensions. So we've now got a few questions for you from our audience members who are watching this evening. So the first one is from Sydney.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi. As a pioneering woman in the pension sector and government, you have trailblazed the way for future young women to follow in your footsteps. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences and how things may have changed for women in these sectors? And what more do you think we need to do? And do you have any advice for young women that you wish you knew when you started?
Great question. Thank you, Sydney. What I can say to you as a young woman, from my experience, is that we have made tremendous strides in helping women advance through their careers and build up a good career in the workplace, or even working for themselves. When I started, after my PhD, I went into the city and decided I would do some investment management. I was investing pension fund money. I was usually the only woman. And many times I would go to international conferences. And if I had asked a question, very often the chair would say, well, could the gentleman who asked that question please stand up? And then, I'd suddenly raise my hand. Oh, actually, it's me. And people would think, well, I must be the secretary rather than the person who was the professional or whatever. So there was this assumption that women would not be senior. That's no longer the case. Maybe in some limited areas. But now, both being a secretary or a PA or being a professional in another field can be valued for what they are and are not seen as junior roles that are only fit for women who were seen as the lesser sex or the less able in the workplace. Also, we've made tremendous strides in helping women work while they are also mothers. And again, this was very hard fought and very hard won. Lots of women, including myself, in the workplace when we started, it was assumed that if you got married or if you had children, you were gone. And it was assumed that you were a fair target for sexist jokes and that the office banter wouldn't affect you. I mean, it was normal in office life to perhaps be approached by the male bosses in the office, and many of us would have felt if you didn't play along and if they were doing something that would be totally inappropriate today, you had no one to complain to. So either you left the job or you put up with it. We don't have to do that now, which is fantastic. I think there's still a way to go. Certainly on gender pay, it's still the case that the professions that women tend to choose are often lesser paid but not always anymore. It used to be almost always. Now it's much more balanced. And I think what I would say to young women is, don't accept being bullied. Don't put up with the sorts of things that are unacceptable without going to see somebody or standing up for yourself. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be rude. You just have to say, I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. And in our young day, that was something that we didn't always have the courage to do. And I wish we had. A lot of friends of mine in the workplace ended up leaving jobs because of the way they were treated. And that is not something that women need to put up with or should put up with. And the other thing, of course, I think is really important is to believe in yourself. Women tend, I don't know why, but often to be less confident in themselves than men of equal ability or even lesser ability might be. So don't be frightened to stand up for yourself and to value yourself. And you don't have to just accept that somebody who talks loudly and boasts about what they do is any better than you. And those are things that I hope you will all remember, and also that you can have a family and still be successful in your chosen career.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Sydney.
Thank you. So our next question is from Adi.
Hi, Adi.
Hi. So you were a Kennedy Scholar at Harvard University in America, a program that seeks to encourage closer transatlantic relations and make it easier for UK students to study at Harvard and MIT. What was studying at one of the top universities in the world like, and how was it different from your UK undergraduate experience?
Thanks, Eddie. I mean, I was extremely fortunate to get that Kennedy Scholarship. It was the most wonderful experience. And if any of you have an opportunity like that, please take it. I remember when I got it, I'd never been to America. In fact, I'd never been really I'd never lived away from home. And I was thinking of not doing it. I was so frightened of sort of going out there, but it turned out to be the most wonderful experience. And American university life is different from that in Britain. At undergraduate level, it's much less specialized. You know, we tend to specialize in a subject, and that's what you focus on for your degree. In America, there's much more broad-based liberal arts type studies where you study a whole range of things. But when you get to graduate level at one of these top universities, it is a completely different ballgame. And what you find is that you are in this amazingly rarefied atmosphere being taught by the top brains in the world, surrounded by people who have always been top of whatever they've done. So I was with the international students as well as the American students. I was in one of the dorms. And I was with people from all over the world. I had friends from Brazil and from other European countries and all the Asian countries. And what struck me was when it came to exam time, they were the people who had always come top in their exams. They were pretty much top of their country. So it wasn't just top of the school or anything like that. And there they were at Harvard, all trying to be top. And you could only have one being top there. So what it taught me was that you don't have to be top. Once you're at a place like that, you've already achieved. And unfortunately, one of my good friends tried to commit suicide because she felt that she wasn't doing well enough because she'd always come top. And what I can say to all of you is never put that kind of pressure on yourself. coming top doesn't matter. And especially when you've reached that sort of level, be proud of what you've done and don't just compete with everybody else when you're already at that kind of senior level. You know, there's this driving yourself further and further and further, putting more and more pressure on, isn't what life is about. And if you look around the top of any company or global institution, nobody asks whether you were top of your year. Nobody even asks whether you got a first. It's what you are like at the job, and you do your best wherever you are. And that's what ends up being valued. Yes, when you're young, it seems so important that you've got to be top in this and top in that, and you get the pressure. And actually, once you get into the workplace in particular, it's really important to just be part of a team and be satisfied to do as good a job as you can, not worry about perfection, because nobody's perfect.
Thank you, Adi, for your question. I think so many people like myself, I did my GCSEs last year, my A-levels are coming up next year. Being the best in the class is something that is, first of all, so difficult to do. And for many people, it's not possible to reach that. You never will become the best in the class, but it doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. And I think that message is so important for the young people we've got watching that may have exams coming up soon. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's just so important. So our next question comes from Louis.
Hi, Louis.
Hi. So obviously you were responsible for bringing in the workplace pension. So what should young people know about it? What sort of role does it play in their lives? And why should we be thinking now about our future so early in our careers?
Okay, so it's never too early to think about your future, and it's never too early to think about a pension. What is so fantastic about the current situation, the success of the workplace pension, the so-called automatic enrollment scheme, where when you start a job, as long as you're earning more than 10,000 a year, which almost everybody will be, your employer has to put you into a pension scheme at work, and your employer has to pay into it for you. So what you're automatically doing is putting a bit of your money in, and if you put that money in, the employer will put money in for you as well, and in almost all cases you get extra money from the taxman, which doesn't happen very often. So pensions give you free money. The downside of it for young people is that you can't get the money back until much later on, further down the line. But although that might seem like a downside sometimes, in the long run, that's the positive bit about pensions. They are growing over time for you so that you will have more money later on in life than you would do if you hadn't bothered to save, or than you would do if you'd saved in any other vehicle. You know, if you put £100 into an ISA, then on day one, you've got £100 in there. That's your money, and it will grow or it wouldn't grow over time. That's for you. But if you put £100 into a pension, more often than not, you'll get at least another £100 from your employer, plus at least another £25 from the taxman. So your £100 immediately, if you're in a workplace pension, could become worth 200 or more. You double your money, but you've only paid half. So that's a pretty good deal. A lot of people don't realize it. The pensions industry doesn't talk about it in that way either, which I always find very strange. You know, you hear about markets having fallen by 10% or 20%. But if you only put in half of the money in the first place, you're still quids in. You're still better off than if you'd put that money into a bank account or an ISA. Of course, there's no guarantees, but the fact is that employers are recognizing that they need to help you build up money for when you can no longer be employed, when you're past your working years. We don't know in advance when that's going to be. But the government is also helping, because we have the lowest state pension in the developed world in this country. If you're thinking you're going to rely on the state pension, what the government's giving you, you might have a pretty miserable time later on. Because, as I say, it is not just one of the lowest, it is the lowest of all the developed countries in the OECD table. And it relies on you having a private pension to top it up so that you can have a better later life.
Thank you, Louis, for your question. So our next question is from Eris.
Hi, Eris.
Hi. Do you think enough is being done to teach young people money management? It's not really on the curriculum and hasn't really ever been. Do you feel this is a key life skill missing for many in society?
Brilliant. Again, God, all these questions are really, really good. Somebody's worked hard here. Thank you. Eris, absolutely right. We have never done enough about financial education. To be fair, I look around the world and I don't see that happening anywhere else either, particularly. It is a massive failing. You know, we are teaching about history, we're teaching about geography, but we're not teaching about how to manage money or run a business. But that's what's going to also be so important for you once you've left school. Even when you get to university, nobody is helping you to make these financial choices, to financially plan or budget. Having said that, the government has recently put in financial education modules into the school curriculum. But that's very late in the day. And of course, the vast majority of people who are now in the country and in the workplace have already left school, so it's too late for them. And there is now quite a push to try to put financial education into the workplace. And of course, it makes sense. You know, if your employer is paying money into a pension for you, they're also, of course, paying you a salary every month, then it does make sense that somebody takes responsibility or takes an interest in making sure you know how to make the best of that money and how to look at the important decisions about managing your money, savings, not getting into unaffordable debts. You know, you'll see so many adverts that will entice you into putting your money into things that might not be right for you. And if you don't have that basic education and knowledge or grounding, and you've never had it at home, then in the workplace might well be a very good opportunity to improve the financial awareness of the country. And that's certainly important. And as I say, it's something that Western societies don't seem to have taken seriously enough. It's just kind of, first of all, people don't somehow want to talk about money. There's that sort of taboo, you know, I mustn't say what I earn or how much I'm worth or what debts I've got or any of that stuff. But also, I think there is this almost automatic feeling that, of course, everybody knows you get the money and you spend it, or you get the money and you spend some and save some, without looking at what, for example, a professional financial planner would help you understand. So we've got the Money and Pension Service, which was set up. It's something that I was working on as minister with the Treasury as well. And it's now in place, and actually it's a really good website, and they've got some very good modules to help you with financial planning. Money Saving Expert also, you know, there are lots of places you can go, and I would encourage you to play around with some of the financial modelers and learn a bit with some of the latest techniques that are, I think, really helpful and useful, and a really important part of how to be able to live your life as best you can and make the most of your money and the opportunities.
Thank you, Eris, for your question. I can say JLGB recently have run a few sessions on the camps that we've run on money management for people, perhaps young people 11, 12 years old maybe, as well as our sergeants even older than that, 16, 17, going off to uni soon. They run some amazing money budgeting kind of workshops and skill sessions, which have been really, really helpful. And I can also say I recently got like my first job at the start in September, at the start of the year. And when you start earning money, the one thing you do as a child, because I'm still very young, is you spend it on what you see. Those adverts you mentioned, you do kind of think, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. But you kind of realize as you do that and you earn your own money, you kind of realize, let's slow down a bit here. Let's actually put some money away. Let's start saving.
Well done, you.
These money management skills and lessons that I think as well should also be taught a bit more will definitely come in handy, and I think will benefit a lot of people.
Yes,
so our next question for you is from Josh.
Hello, Josh.
Evening, Baroness. So considering how bad press technology has had, I know my mum frequently nags me to use less of my phone. Do we think we've jumped forward in terms of people's use and understanding of technology due to the pandemic? And how has the Lords had to adapt their use of technology?
I lost you for a minute there. Sorry, I think I got the question though. About technology and how the House of Lords has adapted, is that right? Yes,
and do we think that in terms of the wider society as well, do we think we've jumped forward in terms of people's use and understanding of technology because of the pandemic?
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, I think that is a really interesting observation, and it is very pertinent. You know, we have certainly seen things since March happen that you would have never imagined could happen, even over a period of 2 or 3 years, and they'd happened in 2 or 3 months. People who had not been au fait with technology, or who always said there's nothing to replace a meeting in person, who have now just gone on to the technological platforms, Zooms, Teams, whatever it is, and become adept at it, and also managed to work quite well. I must say, I find it quite stressful, sort of staring at the screen for hours, but actually, I think that's probably something to get used to. And I do miss the personal interaction, but I can't say that it's something that has made it really impossible to function, which you might have expected before. The House of Lords is a brilliant example, because here you have hundreds of senior members of society who have always had the tradition that they must be in the House, in the chamber, in order to debate legislation and in order to vote on legislation or to debate the big issues of the day. You have to look at the whites of people's eyes, and many of them have never really used the kind of modern technology that we're talking of here. And indeed, some of them live in areas of the country or have been in lockdown in areas of the country which didn't even have much in the way of broadband. And yet the House of Lords authorities, within just a few weeks, have managed to connect pretty much everybody together, so you can sit in the Lords virtually and vote remotely, which was always said to be impossible. Lots of people have begged for it, but it was always said to be not possible. And the House of Lords staff have shown the most unbelievable dedication and patience, talking through all these people who didn't really know about technology from one end to the other, helping them navigate this system, be able to operate the system, and with you know, the greatest patience in an incredibly short space of time, it's happened. So I think what the pandemic has perhaps done is advance much of the technology that we might have got to in 2 or 3 years' time and condensed it into 2 or 3 months. What will happen next, we'll have to see, because I think we have to hope that some of the areas which are being done remotely will get back to being done in person, because that also has consequences for the economy. But other areas, we may never have to have so much office space. We may never have to have so much foreign travel. You know, those kinds of things may have been changed fundamentally due to the pandemic. And we may also have addressed some of the issues that we might have otherwise worried about on climate change, because certainly the carbon footprint has significantly reduced.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I think technology, like you said, has made such, not necessarily improvements, but it's allowed us to do so much more in society now. We had on our virtual program on the 7th of May, on VE Day, we had a 96-year-old war veteran, which
Lovely.
it's just amazing to find a 96-year-old who can use Zoom. It's a technology new to all of us, and it's fantastic to get people that maybe don't use technology as much to come and use technology. And it has been the way that most of us have connected.
And I hope that it can be really helpful for a lot of the lonely elderly people who are living on their own, who in the past might not have been able to connect with family and friends, to at least have that connection beyond the telephone, you know, to be able to see grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A number of families have managed to get the older generations to engage in this virtual technology because they had to. They just didn't have a choice. If you wanted to see your grandchildren or great-grandchildren, that's what you had to do. And that is, again, I think, a lasting benefit for a number of different areas of society.
Definitely. Another charity that I volunteer for, Jamie, the mental health charity, there's a lot of elderly people there with mental health issues, and Zoom has been something that connects them, and running sessions for them when they can't come to centres and they can't see each other in person. It's just amazing to give these people, the older generations, a chance to connect and still interact with the people that they would love to interact with in person.
And also, of course, in the past, without this, if they had an accident or if they weren't well enough to go out to a meeting, that was it. They didn't have any opportunity. Now, you may end up finding that you can help people be part of something if they are not well, recovering from a hip operation or whatever it is. In a sort of hybrid session, again, with the Lords, we've now got some people going in, but most people are doing it, participating virtually. But this hybrid way of working, again, can be much more inclusive than you would have been able to do in the past.
Definitely. So our next question is from Emily.
Hello, Emily.
Hi there, good evening. So you've just voted this evening. What is it like to be a peer in the Lords? And are there any interesting votes or current bills being debated at the moment that we should be attending to?
Well, being in the Lords is, I just think it's an enormous privilege. And you're surrounded by people who are just such experts in so many different areas. You know, one always feels hopelessly inadequate. You know, there are all these people who are just so brilliant in their field. And at the beginning, I just thought, oh my goodness. But then you realize actually you can learn so much from interacting with people. We do go through legislation in huge amounts of detail, much, much more than MPs do in the Commons. And lately, there has been the most incredible workload of different bills coming through, some of it to do with emergency legislation because of coronavirus. Over past year, 2 years, and certainly in recent months, there's been a lot to do, of course, with the dreaded B word, Brexit. And now we are working on legislation that is looking at so many different aspects of life. There's an agricultural bill that might have ramifications, for example, for shechita. So there are things that we need to be aware of to make sure that we protect the different animal welfare issues that there are, the food standards issues that we have. These are all bound up in the bill. There is an immigration bill, which we'll be looking at. Today, we were actually doing a piece of regulation that banned a very evil, really evil, far-right group as part of the anti-terrorism legislation. And that, you know, it's really fascinating. There are so many different areas that you can work on, where it's national security or welfare benefits or different sectors of the economy and emergency help, medical stuff, social care. There are so many areas that are going through. And then you have, every day you have questions, and you have opportunities to question ministers, or ministers are making statements. To be honest, at this particular moment, it's much harder to hold ministers to account when you're operating remotely. I think the government's quite happy about that, because it makes a minister's life rather easier, because you have to speak in certain time slots, whereas in the normal course of events, you could just pop up and say, I'm sorry, I didn't agree with that answer, or you didn't really answer the question. Can you try again? You can't do that quite at the moment so easily. So, you know, there are frustrations at the moment with the Lords, but in general, the work is really important. A lot of legislation gets detailed scrutiny to try and get it right, or to try and look at including things or watching out for banana skins that might have crept in, and protecting the public, protecting consumers. All of these things are bound up in the work that is done in the House of Lords.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. So our final question from the audience is from Jordana.
Hello, Jordana.
Hi, thank you so much. It's been so interesting. I just wanted to ask, so you're well known for supporting the older generation, and particularly with the pandemic, it's been really pivotal to support them. But I was wondering if you thought enough is being done for young people right now, kind of in the post-corona, post-Brexit world.
When you started saying, I know you're well known for supporting, I thought you were going to say Spurs.
You're well known for that as well.
Yeah. And I can't possibly go through the evening without saying, come on, you Spurs. So anyway, thank you, Jordana. You were actually asking a much more serious question. What has happened over the last few months in connection with this pandemic, I have found a little bit disturbing, because there seems to have been an undercurrent of ageism creeping back in, disguised as caring for older people or looking after older people. And there's also been this narrative that seems to pit younger people against older people. And you had some people saying that young people's lives have been put on hold to save old people. But that, for me, is a very socially divisive statement, and also just not right. We stopped children going to school because we didn't know how the virus would affect school children, young children. At the early stages, we had no idea what we were dealing with. We knew that frail, vulnerable, elderly people were particularly at risk, but they're particularly at risk from any illness. They're much more at risk from flu or any of the other things that you might get. what was also clear was that this was something that was unknown, and we needed to make sure that we tried to protect people against it until we knew what we were dealing with, or hopefully knew better how to treat it. Yes, it is true that young people, I mean, your education, for example, even in the Second World War, schools kept going and exams continued. So I think this is pretty unprecedented, what's been happening. But I hope that that can be recoverable. And yes, a lot of young people leaving university this year are really struggling to find work. And that is awful. And I hope and believe that the government will focus on targeted help for those groups that have really lost out. But in the grand scheme of what's happened, almost everybody has lost out. And if you start saying, well, you're worse affected than me, or I'm worse affected than you, your next implication is that therefore those who are, if you're worse affected than me, you deserve more money. If I'm worse affected than you, I deserve more money. Rather than saying we're a society, we're a group as a whole, we need to look at where people have been badly affected and help them, whether it's industries or, you know, like there are certain industries that have been decimated, absolutely decimated, and it's not clear how they're going to recover. Women have been worse affected by the job losses and the income losses than men through the pandemic. And that applies to all ages. Older people also, if they were out of work, are finding it almost impossible to get back into work because of the ageism that is coming back. So, you know, I think we are a society, we need to pull together. Always, I believe, you will find that society will try to help the young because they're our future. You are our future. You are the future of this country. And therefore, efforts that go into helping you will help everybody. Equally, of course, at the other end of life, you've got the people who built up the country. You've got the people who have given so much of themselves and who have developed things throughout their life, made the progress that we have achieved. So whether or not we should be saying one group is more deserving than another, rather than saying we're a society as a whole, and we need to just look in the round at where we need to target help. That, I think, is a much easier way forward than this kind of grouping people into pigeonholed types of people, rather than trying to identify more the sort of individualism and the areas that we need to look at. Not all young people are the same. Not all old people are the same. And society that tries to treat lots of different people who are different as if they are not different isn't necessarily making the most of the skills and talents and opportunities for the whole population that we otherwise could be.
Thank you for your question, Jordana. So I think, like you said before, young people's lives, they may have stopped in some areas, but I think they've got richer, they've been more fulfilled now, helping the older generations. It's not so much you stop the younger generations, so the older generations are better. I think young people's lives haven't stopped, they've become more fulfilled with the more opportunities we get to help the older generations, be it family members or just other generations. Your next door neighbour may be elderly and you go and get her shopping for her, something like that. It's just, I think we live more fulfilled lives as young people for having the opportunity to help the other generations.
But
So
I'm happy it works both ways, you know, that
yeah,
older people will also say, you know, we've got to help the young too. It's how we work together.
Yeah. So I've got just a few more questions for you, if you don't mind. So on your appointment to the Lords, you chose the title of Baroness Altmann of Tottenham in honour of your grandparents who had a shop there, but also because you are a massive Spurs fan, as I am. Were you happy with last week's North London derby result? We've had a few good results on the trot now. So our North London derby, how was that for you?
Oh, anytime Spurs win is wonderful as far as I'm concerned. You know, I grew up at a time when we had a team that won the double, and that, you know, we were on top of the world, and it was exciting. And then I've been through times when, you know, we got relegated, we were doing terribly, but I've always supported Spurs. One day, I believe Spurs will be absolutely on top again. They have come close in the last few years, which has been really exciting. I'm looking forward to next season. The new stadium is wonderful. You know, Tottenham for me is part of me, because my dad and my granddad and I used to go to Tottenham to watch Spurs together. We used to walk from my granddad's shop through to White Hart Lane, and I think football is something that can bring people together as well. But I have to say that within the family, there are other members who are, unfortunately, Arsenal supporters, and that can be difficult, I said to Lord Levy. But anyway, we can respect each other. We rib each other and tease each other. You know, if Arsenal's won and Spurs have lost, I dread the phone call, and probably it's the other way round. But you know, football does great things as well. You know, football brings young people together, and I think hopefully we will get back to the ability for crowds to come in and watch football in the way that we've all been used to, and support our teams and have fun, but also watch the camaraderie that being part of either supporters of a team, or equally a community like ours, or an organization like JLGB. You know, that sense of camaraderie, you're all supporting something, you're all part of something, is a basic part of many people's lives, and a very valuable one.
Definitely. I think being a Spurs fan, agonisingly close in the Champions League final. I know we've got our Chief Staff Officer Adam Shelley here tonight, an avid Liverpool supporter, as he likes to drop in anyone who would listen. But yeah, agonisingly close then. The league, when Leicester won, we came second as well. Very, very, very close. So we've got two really, really quick questions for you to finish off with. These are unprecedented times. We've never had this before, hopefully never again. The physical, mental health and economic impacts may yet affect all of us and future generations for some time to come. But do you have hope for the future? Are you proud of the community, the response, the resilience, and what positives do you think will come out of this?
Well, as far as the Jewish community is concerned, I think we have so much to be proud of. You know, the initiatives that within a very short space of time raised huge sums of money from around the community to support our social care initiatives in our care homes. We've just had an initiative which is sending money to families who are struggling, and now we're distributing money to some of the smaller charities. You know, this is a community effort, and if it has brought us together and showed the power that Jewish people together can wield, I think that's brilliant. I don't mean power in that kind of political sense. What I mean is the power to help each other. You know, that is such a valuable part of Jewish life. If you're in a shul, if you're in a community, if you're in a Jewish youth group, if you're in a Jewish charitable fundraising group, there is a group of you working together to do something to make other people's lives better. And that is the essence of a society that I want to be part of and that I'm proud to be part of.
Definitely, I'm proud as well. Part of a youth movement doing such amazing things. And we're not the only ones doing amazing things like that. There are other Jewish organizations doing similar things,
Yep.
helping so many people, so many charities. It is just amazing to be a part of. So our final question, we always ask our guest to nominate another celebrity or community leader to be a guest on our program in the future and help entertain all the children, young people and families that are stuck at home. So if you've enjoyed tonight's experience, we really, really hope that you have done. Who would you like to nominate to come on?
I wish you'd warned me about this. God, I need to think about it. I mean, if you can get somebody like either Michael McIntyre at one end of the scale.
Oh, I think that would probably be one of the best ones. If we could get him, it'd be unbelievable.
I mean, Esther Ranson, Emily Maitlis, I think she would be great.
Esther Ranson, I think my auntie works with Esther at the moment,
Right.
and did on That's Life years ago. So we could try and get Esther Ranson on. Yeah, thank you so much. So
thank you for all the hard work you've done and for doing it also professionally. I think you have handled this evening brilliantly. The questions have been really outstanding, and all strength and continued success and hatzlacha to JLGB and all of the people in it.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening and inspiring all of us. We have really loved hearing about your career, your family, your campaigning roles, and your thoughts for a bright future that we hope to have.
Please, God.
Good luck to you with everything that comes next for you. We also want to take this opportunity to thank you for your continued support of JLGB over so many years. And we want to make sure that you have our gratitude. Take care, and we hope to see you again very soon in person if possible.
And you, thank you. All the best.
So that is it for this evening. Thank you everyone for tuning in and yet again being a part of history. A quick reminder that we are looking for everyone to get involved with our JLGB virtual program. If you have a special skill and you want to teach it on our virtual program, please email virtual@jlgb.org to get involved. Please also remember, if you want, you can send in your pictures of the hedgehogs that you guys made earlier today. When you finish them off, send them to virtual@jlgb.org. We would love to see them. And we will be back on Monday night when we're going to play The Price is Right before a meditation session with Adam. We will then be taking part in a healthy eating and nutrition session with the Ginger Kitchen before chatting to Ari Jesner about organ donation during our acts of kindness. And then we're joined by the Love Island star Anton. Until then, keep well, stay safe, and good night.